The agonized human screams of a 9-year-old boy tore through the alien torture chamber as the sadistic Brunali interrogator Thule meticulously peeled back bloody strips of skin from the child's arm, not knowing Paul Robinson was the first tortured human child ever encountered by the brutal Brunali Empire, and would make them pay in blood. Paul writhed against the cold metal restraints, shrieking that he had never even heard of the imaginary human military base Thule wanted the location of, as the alien slowly pushed the razor-sharp scalpel deeper. Hundreds of adult prisoners had snapped like twigs under Thule's cruel ministrations, spilling every secret. But this tiny alien, a human child soldier, proved far more resilient than Thule ever encountered. No matter. He had all the time in the galaxy to peel apart this fascinating creature. As Paul screamed, Thule reached for a mediscanner device, gloating he would dissect those alien eyeballs while keeping the boy fully conscious. Thule's blood raced, thrilled at his small captive's sheer agony, relishing his total power over lesser beings. As Thule aimed the device at Paul's straining eyes, combat alarms suddenly blared. Cursing, Thule checked the tactical display and stared in shock. A human warfleet had materialized from nowhere, effortlessly smashing Thule's world's orbital defenses to rubble in seconds, and now bore down on the surface seeking their kidnapped child. Apoplectic with rage, Thule spun and slammed his truncheon down on the boy's knee with a loud crack. Let the creatures come. He would make the alien brat suffer as slowly as possible before those human monsters took this planet. Yet as Thule stormed from the chamber, his small captive somehow pushed past the all-consuming pain, dislocating both thumbs to slip his restraints before dragging himself across the blood-slick floor. He had to escape. Had to survive. The humans were here. If he could only hold on a bit longer. With the torturer gone, Paul dug deep for the last reserves of will to live. Gritting his teeth, he dislocated both thumbs with sharp pops, allowing him to slip his blood-slicked hands free of the restraints. He crashed to the floor, his shattered knee exploding with agony. But pure adrenaline pushed him to drag himself towards the door, leaving a thick smear of blood in his wake. Alarms wailed through the hallways as Brunali soldiers sprinted past Paul's slowly crawling form, paying no heed to the small, critically injured alien trailing gore across their floors. Ahead, through blurred, tear-filled vision, Paul spotted an open doorway. He hauled himself through it just as the building shook with a nearby explosion, sending soldiers sprawling. The hangar was chaos, pilots scrambling for the controls of their vicious-looking fighters to join the battle in the skies. But there in the corner, a tiny maintenance craft, little more than an engine strapped to a seat. Paul's only chance. He pushed himself across the hangar, biting his lip hard enough to draw blood to keep from screaming at the pain in his devastated knee. With a final heave, Paul tumbled into the cramped cockpit, slamming the canopy shut just as Brunali soldiers burst into the hangar, shouting and pointing at the human child hijacking their ship. Hands shaking, Paul scanned the controls and slammed the throttle forward, shooting out of the hangar into the maelstrom raging outside. Plasma bolts and missiles crisscrossed the smoky sky. Paul had never flown before, but jammed the throttle to its stops, trying to put distance between himself and the nightmare below. Suddenly, a squad of Brunali fighters roared past, locking onto a battered human dropship trying to extract a ranger squad. The dropship juked and weaved, but the Brunali launched a volley of plasma torpedoes. The human ship vanished in a fireball as the rangers' screams cut off. Darkness crept in at the edges of Paul's vision, and he felt his tiny ship lurch into a dive, engines sputtering. The battle-scarred forest rose up to meet him, and then nothing but black. Paul's stolen maintenance craft plummeted through the jungle canopy, branches whipping and scraping against the hull with a terrible shriek of tortured metal. With a bone-jarring crunch, the ship slammed into the ground, throwing Paul's limp body from the shattered cockpit. Miraculously, he was still alive, but each ragged breath sent lances of pain through his small chest. Through blurred, unfocused eyes, Paul spotted the twisted wreckage of the human dropship a short distance away, a medkit, a radio. His only chance. Paul dug his fingers into the dirt, pulling himself forward with a hoarse cry at the white-hot agony in his ruined leg. He fixed his eyes on the crashed dropship, urging his broken body to keep moving. Suddenly, the sharp snap of a twig made Paul freeze, heart hammering in his chest. He looked up to see 3 blood-streaked, heavily armed men emerge from the underbrush, weapons aimed directly at him. The soldiers stared down at Paul, shock and disbelief etched on their haggard faces. They couldn't seem to process the surreal sight of a gravely wounded human child here on this nightmarish alien world. The oldest of the 3, a grizzled, scar-faced ranger sergeant, recovered first. He safed his weapon and rushed to Paul's side, already yanking a tourniquet from his belt. "Jesus Christ," Booker breathed, deft fingers affixing the tourniquet to Paul's horrifically damaged leg. "Ramirez, get on the horn and call for immediate medevac, critical pediatric patient." Paul's vision swam and he fought to form words, reaching up to clutch at Booker's sleeve with a blood-slicked hand. "There's coming," Paul croaked, barely a whisper. "Run!" His eyes rolled back and the world went dark. Booker and his men exchanged grim looks. They all knew exactly what the Brunali did to their prisoners, and now they had a child to protect. "Hernandez, grab the kid, I'll take point. Ramirez, cover our 6, move out," Booker ordered, already turning to melt into the jungle. Hernandez hefted Paul's limp form onto his broad shoulder. The Rangers salvaged what supplies they could from the wrecked dropship and set off at a brisk pace, putting distance between themselves and the rapidly approaching whine of Brunali hunter-killer drones sweeping the battlefield for survivors. As the dense foliage closed around them, Booker's mind raced. What the hell was a human child doing in the middle of this nightmare? They had to find out what was going on, but first, they needed to get the kid to safety, and that meant punching through the enemy line. Cresting a jungled ridge, Booker dropped to a knee, signaling for the squad to hold position. Pulling a battered set of macro binoculars from his ruck, he trained them on the Brunali forward operating base that squatted in the valley below like a bloated insect. The place was a fortress, bristling with anti-aircraft guns and ringed by a heavily armed defensive perimeter. The Brunali had locked down their airspace, making any rescue attempt a suicide run. Booker glanced over his shoulder at Paul's broken, bleeding form, and his jaw tightened. They had to find a way to get a signal out, to get this kid to a med bay before it was too late. He turned back to the enemy stronghold, eyes flicking from gun emplacement to troop position, searching for the slightest gap in their defenses. There had to be a way through. There had to. But deep in his gut, Booker knew one thing for sure. This mission had just gotten one hell of a lot more complicated. As the jungle's oppressive heat gave way to the chill of night, Booker and his men crept through the dense underbrush, the looming silhouette of the Brunali base growing closer with each careful step. Booker signaled a halt at the perimeter, studying the alien fortifications through his night vision goggles. Guard towers studded the high ferrocrete walls at regular intervals, each one manned by a squad of alert Brunali soldiers cradling plasma rifles. But Rangers didn't earn their reputation by shying away from a challenge. With a few quick hand signals, Booker sent Ramirez and Hernandez to neutralize the guards in the nearest tower. The 2 Rangers moved like ghosts, scaling the wall with impossible speed and silence. Muffled thumps and strangled gurgles drifted down. Then Ramirez appeared at the parapet and flashed a thumbs up. Booker and Hernandez followed, Hernandez still cradling Paul's limp form. They crept through the shadows of the base's outer buildings, angling towards the squat concrete bunker of the communications center. Booker pulled a demo charge from his ruck and affixed it to the heavy blast door barring their way. The Rangers took cover and Booker triggered the charge. The door vanished in a muted whoomp of flame and debris. Booker was the first one through the breach, carbine up and scanning for threats. A surprised Brunali comms tech scrambled for his sidearm, but Booker put a burst through his center mass before he could draw. More Brunali poured into the room, but the Rangers cut them down with precise fire. "Ramirez, Hernandez, secure the door. I'm going to tap into their systems and see what I can find," Booker called out, already hunched over the alien computer terminal. His fingers flew across the strange runic keypad as he ran a decryption program from his suit's onboard computer. But Booker had barely begun to sift through the reams of Brunali data when alarm klaxons started blaring throughout the base. He cursed and searched frantically for the files he needed. There, a comprehensive analysis of human fleet disposition and strength, along with Brunali battle plans. Booker slotted a data drive into the terminal and started the file transfer. "Booker, we've got company," Hernandez yelled from the door where he and Ramirez poured fire down the corridor at the approaching Brunali troops. "Hold them off, the transfer's almost done," Booker shouted back. Plasma bolts stitched the walls around him as the Brunali tried to retake the room. Booker ducked and kept his eyes locked on the progress bar, ticking towards 100%. Suddenly Paul groaned and stirred on the floor where they'd laid him. His eyelids fluttered open, and he looked around in confusion at the firefight raging around him. Booker was at his side in an instant. "Hey, kid, you're okay. We're going to get you out of here. I just need you to stay down," Booker said, checking Paul's tourniquet. But instead of nodding and laying back down, Paul struggled to sit up, his face a mask of pain and determination. "The data are not enough. I can get us out," Paul gritted through clenched teeth. Booker stared at the boy in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I memorized the layout. When I escaped, I can guide you—" Paul broke off in a fit of coughing, blood flecking his lips, but his eyes blazed with fierce resolve. Booker hesitated, torn between keeping the critically injured child safe and the knowledge that they were rapidly running out of options. The data finished downloading, and Booker snatched the drive, then knelt next to Paul. "Okay, kid, okay, we'll do it your way. But you stay behind me, and at the first sign of trouble, you get your ass to cover, understand?" Paul nodded weakly, his face pale but determined. Booker called out to Ramirez and Hernandez. "Covering fire now, we're moving out." The Rangers unleashed a blistering barrage down the corridor, sending the Brunali scurrying for cover. Booker scooped up Paul and sprinted from the room, Ramirez and Hernandez hot on his heels. They careened through the labyrinthine hallways of the alien base, Paul shouting directions from Booker's arms. "Left at the junction, now right." Plasma bolts sizzled past as the Brunali pursued them, the snarls of the alien soldiers echoing off the walls. But Paul's uncanny knowledge of the base layout kept the humans one step ahead, darting down maintenance passages and little-used corridors. At last, they burst into the motor pool, a cavernous garage filled with dozens of Brunali vehicles. Booker spotted their ticket out, a heavily armored personnel carrier bristling with a rear-mounted plasma cannon. "Ramirez, Hernandez, get that APC running," Booker snapped, laying down suppressing fire at the Brunali streaming into the garage. The two Rangers sprinted to the vehicle, Ramirez ripping open an access panel and hot-wiring the engine with deft movements. The APC roared to life. "We're in, let's go," Ramirez shouted, swinging into the driver's seat as Hernandez manned the plasma turret. Booker leaped into the crew compartment, still clutching Paul, as bolts of superheated plasma streaked past. Ramirez gunned the engine, and the APC surged forward, smashing through the motor pool's flimsy security gate like it was made of paper. Brunali soldiers scattered as Hernandez opened up with the rear cannon, the weapon spitting Starcore bright balls of plasma into the base's barracks and command center. Booker held tight to Paul as the APC bounced and lurched over the uneven jungle terrain, the boy's face ghostly white in the dim red glow of the vehicle's instrumentation. In minutes, they left the base behind, alien structures giving way to dense foliage and twisting trees. "Clear," Ramirez called from the driver's seat. Booker keyed his comm. "All units, this is Saber Actual. Prepare to detonate charges on my mark." Booker held up a remote detonator, his thumb poised over the trigger. "Mark!" Behind them, a series of massive explosions lit up the night as the Brunali base erupted in flames. Gouts of fire and debris arced into the sky, the shockwaves rocking the speeding APC. "Damn fine work, Saber," Booker said with grim satisfaction. He glanced down at Paul and froze. The boy's eyes were closed and he wasn't breathing. Booker's heart seized in his chest. "Hernandez, man the turret. I need you back here now, the kid's crashing." Booker roared, already starting CPR. Hernandez scrambled into the crew compartment, pulling a medkit from the bulkhead. He passed Booker a bag valve mask, and the Ranger fitted it over Paul's face, pumping oxygen into his lungs as Hernandez prepared a shot of adrenaline. "Come on, kid. Don't you quit on me now. Don't you dare," Booker growled, continuing his chest compressions. Hernandez injected the adrenaline, and they waited breathlessly for Paul's vitals to stabilize. Long, agonizing moments passed. Then a cough, a shuddering gasp. Paul's chest rose and fell as he sucked in a ragged breath. Booker nearly collapsed with relief. "Attaboy. You just keep breathing, okay? We're going to get you out of here," Booker said softly, brushing the hair back from Paul's blood-smeared forehead. The APC burst from the jungle, climbing a steep ridge until it reached a flat cliff-top clearing. In the distance, the faint lights of the human encampment twinkled. Booker activated the vehicle's long-range transmitter. "Overlord, this is Saber Actual. Do you read? I repeat, this is Saber Actual, over." A hiss of static, then, "Saber Actual, this is Overlord. We read you Lima Charlie. What's your status, over?" "Overlord, we have critical intel on enemy forces. Transmitting now. We also have a wounded civilian pediatric. Critical condition. Requesting immediate medevac and extraction. Over." Booker waited tensely for a response, watching the progress bar on the intel uplink. "Saber, be advised. The Brunali have an orbital minefield in place over the AO. We're clearing it now, but it's slow going. ETA to safe passage is 36 hours, over." Booker's heart dropped. He looked over at Paul's still form, the boy's breaths coming shallow and uneven. He didn't have 36 hours. "Overlord, our civilian can't wait that long. He needs immediate medical attention. There has to be another option, over." A heavy pause. Then, "Negative, Saber. The Brunali fleet is massing for an assault on our position. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Without reinforcements, we won't last another 24 hours. I'm sorry, Saber, but no birds can fly until that minefield is clear. Overlord out." The transmission cut off with a click. Booker slowly lowered the comm unit, a crushing weight settling in his chest. Hernandez and Ramirez looked at him silently, their faces grim. Suddenly Paul stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. "The minefield," he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "That's what they wanted, from me, the codes." Booker leaned close, his brow furrowed. "What codes, Paul?" But the boy's eyes rolled back in his head, and he slumped back unconscious once more. Booker sat back heavily, his mind racing. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The Brunali didn't just know about the minefield, they had planned for it. It was a delaying tactic, a way to pin the human fleet in place while they mustered their forces for a final devastating assault. And they had tortured a child, this brave, unbreakable boy, to try and get the codes to disable it. Booker's hands clenched into fists, a cold, righteous fury hardening in his gut. He looked over at Ramirez and Hernandez, saw his own anger and resolve mirrored in their eyes. One way or another, they were getting Paul out, and God help any Brunali that stood in their way. Booker stared at the comm unit, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his broad shoulders. He turned to Ramirez and Hernandez, his eyes haunted. "We're out of options. The fleet won't last another rotation." Booker's voice was leaden with grim finality. "We have to take out that minefield control station. It's the only way." Ramirez and Hernandez exchanged a look, the unspoken understanding of men who had seen too much, lost too much. They knew what Booker was asking. "A suicide run." Hernandez nodded slowly, his jaw set. "We're with you, Sarge. To the end." Booker clasped his shoulder, a silent thank you. He opened the APC's weapon locker and started distributing the remaining ordnance, plasma grenades, breaching charges, and a deadly, unstable prize, the antimatter bomb. A low, pain-filled moan drew Booker's attention. Paul stirred on the deck, his face a bloodless mask, but his eyes, those fierce, unyielding eyes, burned with purpose. "Let me go with you," Paul gasped, each word an agony. "I can get you inside." Booker shook his head, kneeling beside the broken boy. "No, Paul, you've done enough, more than enough. You need to hold on. Keep fighting until—" Paul's blood-flecked hand gripped Booker's arm with surprising strength. A sad, serene smile touched his cracked lips. "I'm dying anyway. This way my death matters." A single tear traced through the grime on Paul's cheek. "Promise me. Promise you'll make them pay for what they did to all of us." A lump rose in Booker's throat. He clasped Paul's small hand in his own. "I swear it, Paul. By all that's holy, the Brunali will face justice for their crimes. Humanity will finish what you started here today." Paul's eyes fluttered closed, his breath shallow. "Make them pay." Ramirez and Hernandez gathered around, heads bowed in silent tribute to the tiny, impossibly brave soul before them. Booker stood, the last vestiges of doubt and fear burned away by the righteous, roaring furnace of his fury. He turned to his brothers in arms, the men he would die beside, his family. "Gear up, we roll in 5. For Paul, for Earth, for every human soul on this God-forsaken rock." As one, the Rangers began their final preparations. Ramirez calibrated the APC's stolen IFF transponder, praying the Brunali clearance codes Paul provided would hold up under scrutiny. Hernandez double-checked their weapons, pressing fresh power cells into the hungry receptacles. Booker cradled the antimatter charge, keying the failed deadly detonator to his biosignature. There could be no margin for error, no second chances. The final seconds ticked away. Ramirez engaged the drive. The APC rolled out onto the blasted landscape, quickly picking up speed. The hulking edifice of the minefield control station loomed on the horizon, squatting like a bloated tumor amid the blackened jungle. Booker switched the comm to the fleet's emergency channel. "Overlord, this is Saber Actual. Commence emergency hyperspace extraction on my signal. Acknowledge." A tense pause, then, "Acknowledged, Saber. Godspeed. Overlord out." There was no fanfare, no heroic speeches. Just 3 men, their weapons, and a shared unbreakable conviction. They would see this through, whatever the cost. The APC raced across the ruined Earth, vaulting over craters and shattered tree trunks. In minutes they reached the outer perimeter of the control station, the immense particle cannons tracking their approach. Booker held his breath as Ramirez broadcast their stolen clearance code. An eternity passed in the space of a heartbeat. Then the cannons stood down, the perimeter gates grinding open. They were in. The APC roared into the heart of the Brunali stronghold, plasma bolts sizzling past the viewport. Hernandez answered with the turret, superheated ions scything through the enemy ranks. Booker braced as Ramirez plowed the vehicle through the reinforced walls of the primary structure, the twisted metal screaming against the APC's ablative armor. Proximity alert. They were now directly over the fusion reactor that powered the orbital mines, the end of the line. "Out! Go, go, go!" Booker roared, kicking open the APC's hatch and charging into the chaos, carbines spitting blue-white death. Hernandez and Ramirez followed close behind, a maelstrom of blistering plasma and hammering slugs. The Rangers fought like men possessed, scything through the Brunali defenders in close-quarters hell. Booker rammed a plasma grenade into a snarling alien's mouth and kicked him back into his squad, the detonation painting the walls with shimmering gore. Inch by bloody inch they pushed into the control room, the razor hail of enemy fire tearing at their flesh, their armor, their resolve. But they would not be denied. With a final titanic effort, Booker and his men sealed the blast doors, the dense Brunali alloy buckling but holding against the tide of pounding, shrieking hostiles beyond. Hernandez and Ramirez took up positions at the door, their weapons glowing white-hot as they poured unrelenting fire through the slowly widening gaps. "Overlord, blow the mines, get our people out now!" Booker screamed into the comm, his helmet gone, blood sheeting down his face. "Copy, Saber, all ships emergency jump." The deck shuddered as, high above, the battered human fleet surged for the hole blasted in the minefield, the Brunali ships in close pursuit. Booker watched the tactical display, his heart in his throat. The first human ships reached the breach and vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace. One by one, the human vessels escaped the Brunali's grasp, until only the shattered rearguard remained. The Brunali fleet opened fire, a tsunami of plasma and missiles detonating against the rearguard's failing shields. Booker clenched his jaw so hard he tasted blood. They just needed a few more seconds. With a blaze of light, the last human ship leaped into hyperspace, the Brunali salvo passing harmlessly through its fading silhouette. A ragged cheer tore from the Rangers' throats. They had done it. The fleet was safe. But the fight was far from over. The armored door shrieked as the Brunali began cutting through with plasma torches, the metal glowing hellish orange. Booker armed the antimatter charge, his thumb hovering over the dead man's switch. He turned to Ramirez and Hernandez, his brothers, and saw his own pride, his own calm acceptance of their fate, reflected in their eyes. "For Paul?" Booker said, his voice steady and clear. "For Paul," they echoed, as the door gave way and the Brunali poured in. Booker closed his eyes and thought of Earth. He pressed the detonator. In an instant of searing light and unimaginable heat, the antimatter charge annihilated the control station, vaporizing Booker, Ramirez, Hernandez, and the Brunali in a maelstrom of pure energy. The orbital mines went dark, the Brunali's iron grip on the system broken at last. In the silence after, a single word echoed across the stars, a promise and a vow. Vengeance. Humanity had not forgotten. Humanity would never forget. The Terran Alliance rose as one, 100 worlds unified in grief and rage, their fleets mustering for total war. The galaxy would tremble before the wrath of man. And the name of a human boy, a child who had endured the unendurable and sacrificed everything for his people, would be forever remembered, forever honored. Paul. The Brunali had sown the wind. Now they would reap the whirlwind. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.